Okay, it's 1 o'clock. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch and prepared for another interactive and inspiring session. If you're just tuning in for the first time today, welcome to the 2021 Vice Chancellor's Strategy event, Shaping Our Shared Future. For those of you returning from the morning session, I hope you've had a good opportunity to reflect on what you heard this morning, what you're able to discuss, and I'm looking forward to another really great discussion over the next couple of hours. The way this next session will work, we have 3 panel discussions lasting about 40 minutes each, with a 5-minute break in between for you to stretch, get a little bit of fresh air, and come back for the next panel. What we're going to hear today is essentially from stakeholders that represent the 3 main goals of our strategic plan. And we're starting off with goal 1, empowering our students for their future. So we'll be inviting questions from the audience as well throughout these sessions. So if you're not familiar with the Q&A function, it's at the bottom of this screen within the Zoom webinar. So we'll be monitoring that and passing on questions to our moderators to pose to the students or to ask you to pose directly to the panelists. And at this point, I will hand over to our first moderator for this session, which is Pro-Vice Chancellor Students, Professor Julia Coyle.
Thank you very much, Rich. Look, very pleased to be invited to assist with this session. And just my thanks go to the students for, as you can see from the biographies shared, these are very busy people. And so many thanks to them for sharing their time with us. Now, we're going to do a bit of an introduction with the students, just walking through some elements and identifying those key points as to why they put their hand up to come and talk to us today. We'll start off with Jackson.
Hi guys, so I'm Jackson. You've got my biography, but some important facts about me is that I'm a current council member and member of the Academic Senate, elected by undergraduate students, and I'm the chair of the Student Advisory Council. So I'm quite well connected with other student representatives and other students, where the Student Advisory Council is sort of a body that advises the university and the Vice Chancellor on different matters affecting students, as well as issues that are facing students. So we sort of reach out throughout the community through different positions. The 3 things that I'm sort of looking at today is, first, I'd like to see that how degrees can focus more on practical application and practical skills to provide graduates that are more suited for the digital world. I'd also like to see the university work a little bit more on ensuring clear communication with students to prevent confusion and potential backlash, which we've seen a little bit over the past year. This goes for all areas of the university though, not just the large policy decisions, but can also extend to academic misconduct, in the new exam environment, and even providing feedback on subjects and how subjects are run. And lastly, and probably my most important point in my passion, is increasing student representation at the university through involvement in policy and other decisions. And if I'd sort of like to leave you all with one thing at the end of this, is that I'd like to get everyone to think of student consultation as more than just a tick in the box exercise. Try and involve students in all steps of the process, in planning, in seeking approval, reviewing policies, looking at the strategic direction of the university as we're doing today. And if students say present a partially complete or not a totally practical idea, don't just dismiss it for being that. Sort of look at the issue, the root issue that the student's trying to address, and work with them to create a more practical solution that's actually workable. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackson. And we'll expand on those points a little bit through the questions, I'm hoping. Juliana, thank you.
Hello, I'm Juliana, and it's an honor to be here representing and voicing some of my colleagues. And as you may see in my bio, I'm the kind of student that likes to have a finger in one place and a toe in another. So it's one of my passions to be part of the improvements and developments that can benefit the ones around me. If I could, I would probably see some familiar faces around here, which is undoubtedly due to my participation in different areas of UOW. But recent occurrences made me reflect and bring some 3 points here that I suggest your attention. So number 1 is about communication, which is deeply connected to the other points that I will follow up as well. So I believe that we have to work towards the increase and improvements of communications inside UOW. Cases of success need to be better addressed and better used as models. So are we really aware of what's happening across faculties and schools? Are we trying to reinvent the wheel for the fifth time, especially in terms of digital changes due to remote learning? My second thought is about the support and encouragement of students' participations in different areas, as Jackson has just highlighted as well. We usually see the same faces and engagement from the same students. So the ideas might be slightly different, but are we actually opening space for others to arise? And what can we do to have a larger group of students that engage and participate? How can we gather a broader range of ideas that will actually lead to innovations? Third and last, I highly believe that we should search for partnerships among students, tutors, coordinators, and leadership. I can see a gap between them, and which does not make UOW the excellent workplace. And it's just like a domino effect, in my opinion. So if the works are not happy, students won't receive the best delivery, and the whole university community collapses. So how can we work together to contribute to change the vision of enemies to partners, to make every stakeholder happy and successful, as Trish had mentioned this morning? How can we make sure that UOW is the best place to work, study, and gather? Although the word gathering nowadays is kind of dangerous in COVID times. So I hope that I can bring some reflections, and we can work together to make plans for a promising future for this university that I learned to respect and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. We can have a socially distanced gathering, can't we?
Yeah, that's right.
Keval, thank you. Over to you.
Greetings, my name is Keval and I'm an international student studying here at UOW. And as you can see from my bio, I've been involved in a couple of activities and positions here at UOW since past 2 years that I've been here for. And the three key points that were brought to my notice after my survey around the campus and talking to a couple of students was we are not as visible to the outside world as we expect to be. I had a word with one of the leading consultancies in India, and they said that out of 1,000 students that they sent to Australia, only 20 of them just even consider applying to UOW, and leave the fact that how many of them actually end up in UOW, which was eye-opening for me. The next point that I would like to make is discussing how to enhance the UOW experience. So once the students are here at UOW, how can we enhance their experience? And due to the recent events, we've seen that a lot of students are feeling a bit disengaged from their curriculum or the university experience that they should otherwise have under normal circumstances. And last but not the least, the third point that I would like to make here is promoting the mental health of the entire student population here at UOW. Due to some of the recent unfortunate events that we all might have heard of, this is something that I really would like to work upon. I also work with Professor Julia for the Pro Vice Chancellor Students Mental Health Advisory Committee, and this might be really helpful for the entire UOW student population.
Thank you, Keval. Really nice. Thank you. Now, Kathleen, over to you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So you've all got my bio, you know what I'm studying, but I guess the word limit of that bio kind of didn't do justice to all the different lenses that I look at this university from. So I'm an Aboriginal student living off country. I began my journey as a mature age student through the Indigenous admissions program. I've been employed by the university for a number of roles, including student ambassador for Woolyoonga, inter-uni mentor, a research assistant, and I'm now working in the office at Early Start. I've engaged with disability services as I have a learning disability. I'm now living on campus accommodation at Bengalay, and I'm also one of 3 women to represent UOW in the New Colombo Plan Scholarship Program. So I kind of wear many hats around this place. So I guess that's kind of why I'm here, because I see such a broad spectrum of people and, you know, systems and stuff like that. So today, I really want to yarn about the importance of First Nations-led support services to Torres Strait Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students such as Woolloongabba, as well as promoting opportunities for paid internships and work experience, and I guess the distress that unpaid work can cause to students who may be providing for a family or supporting themselves financially. I did have a third point, which is sort of increasing awareness of the formal complaint system, but I feel like we're going to be pretty stretched for time. So we'll see if we get to that one.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Now, for the participants in the broader room, we're going to go through some questions that we've already, that the students have already seen. And then we're hoping that you are going to provide us with some other questions through the question and answer function that we can then pose to the students. We're mindful that we don't have a huge amount of time, but we're wanting to cover a range of topics as we go. The first question is to you, Kathleen. You highlight the importance of First Nations-led support services to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students as provided by Woolloongabba. Why is this so important? And what should non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff who deliver learning opportunities and services do to improve their practice?
Thanks, Julia. So I actually I want to ask the group a question first. Now, you don't need to answer out loud, but I guess reflect within yourselves. My question is, have you engaged with the Woolloongabba Indigenous Centre, and to what extent do you actually understand what services they provide? So, talking from personal experience, Woolloongabba has supported me culturally, socially, academically through their one-on-one tutoring program, financially through employment and paid internship opportunities, and more recently with accommodation when I was absolutely desperate for somewhere to live. Coming in as a mature age student, university was my second chance at life, but I would not have thrived in the last 3 years if it wasn't for the support provided by Woolloongabba. So I'm also out of breath because I'm really congested in my sinuses. So I apologize if I lose breath mid-sentence. So there are roughly 500 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students currently enrolled at UAW, each with their own unique backgrounds, stories, and cultural connections. But what you need to remember is that for the majority of these students, it was our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents that were denied the opportunity to create a better future. And that's why many of us are here, to break those intergenerational traumas. So having Woolloongabba as a support unit is instrumental to so many people's success, because the staff up there, they get it. They get the struggles. But your responsibility is ensuring that these students are safe within the broader university system. So what are you doing to guarantee that when these students step into the classroom, they're not just academically supported, but are culturally safe as well? You've got these lovely artworks around campus, native plants, these weird wallaby statues, sort of things, but that's not the answer. It's deeper than that. It comes from within. So that's when you've got to start listening to people like Jamie Beveridge and Jade Kennedy with the initiatives such as Jindola. These people have dedicated their lives to understanding our needs. So each and every one of you have some influence on the educational journey of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. So what are you going to do when you leave this room? UAW has the potential to be the movers and shakers in this space, but real, genuine action is needed. Thanks.
That's an excellent start, and I'm seeing a reaction in the strategy group. So, and I'm not sure whether you can see those as well, Kathleen, but we'll share them with you afterwards if you can't at this stage. I'm going to keep the conversation moving along. Keval, You raised mental health and well-being for the entire student population. Is there a particular group of students that you're concerned for? And what do you believe is missing in UOW's current approach?
So I believe that currently we are not factoring in the international students who are stuck abroad due to the travel restrictions. And most of them are facing time zone differences. And I've had a word with a couple of them personally, and they're finding an issue with coping up with their day-to-day routines and the tutorials, lectures, and deadlines. So one of the personal experiences that I had with one of the students was that particular student had to wake up 3 a.m. in the midnight to just attend a maths tutorial. And because the tutorials were compulsory to attend and it factored in for 10% of your overall academic results, that student had to wake up at that particular time, and then his entire day would just shift forward or would cause hindrance with his day-to-day routines. He also told me that he had few issues waking up, maintaining his sleep cycle, and this was causing personal issues for him. And nobody in the tutorial ever mentioned that he could go to the support services at the university or the support services that the university provides. So this is one of the biggest drawbacks that we're having. The communication is, I guess, lacking between the student and the university. They are not aware of all the options that they have at their fingertips, or what are all the support services that we run. And maybe the curriculum is developed in such a way that we don't factor in the time zone differences that currently exist due to the travel restrictions. So, yep.
Thank you. I think that's really important. And it's that sort of inadvertent invisibility of services that create problems for many students, I think. I'm going to move along, and we'll start to get the questions coming in from the participants as well. But what you're seeing in the background is a really strong support from the participants. You're getting standing ovations and claps from everybody. So thank you for what you're doing at this stage. So Juliana, you highlighted the immense bank of ideas worth being heard that are held within the student community. What's currently blocking our capacity to hear those ideas? And what is one thing that we could do to fix it?
Julia, thank you for this question. I think that by having this easy way of talking, I came across too many different ideas that students have shared. And usually they come from small and informal conversations. And one of the lines that I have already heard from students, and I can sometimes put myself in this list, is that they don't know where to go, right? So if they don't know where to go, or if it takes too much to actually reach that channel, the idea is lost. So I was actually reading a recent study that proved that a normal person has an average of 6,200 thoughts a day. So among these thoughts, I was just thinking about how many ideas are available and they actually stay in people's minds and they never become something real. So the point here is not to create what we call chronic complainers. It's not like complaining about things. It's just to nurture the creative people, right? So students, staff, those who are actually agents for innovation and changes maybe, right? So I think opening the space for these ideas to come out is one of the keys, in my opinion. So there should be open channels in which students or whoever wants to contribute for those ideas can actually express themselves. And when I talk about ideas, he's not just large scale ideas such as I accelerate. There is awesome. I was thinking about small ideas such as a better way of managing the laundry kiosk at the accommodation. Just small actions that can actually lead to a considerable and huge impact to the whole community.
Thank you. So we need some mechanism to sort of really develop our approach to gathering in those ideas across time.
That's right.
Jackson, so you were talking about the need to ensure clear communication and the importance of preventing confusion and potential backlash, as being a problem associated with poor communication. So how is our current approach blocking effective communication? And what do you think is the first thing we should do to either change or stop doing?
So I guess there's sort of two heads that I think about this. The first is making sure communication is clear. And I think the university's making some progress there with the changes they're making to how students can ask questions and get answers a bit quicker. But in that way, still, it needs to flow down to the smaller levels, like the subject communications and all these sort of levels. And especially consulting students in communication can help make them a lot clearer and can help prevent issues arising later on, because from the communications that I've been involved in, we've spotted the students have spotted some things that to students are pretty obvious that they might be an issue, but to a member of staff, you might not think about it from that perspective. And so sometimes it's helpful to run it by a few students before you actually put out an announcement or something like that. The other head that I look at it is sort of the confusion and potential backlash. And this sort of comes into my head from a lot of the COVID stuff going on last year, which is hard to cope with, but I think we're getting a bit more in the stride of it. One of the big examples is graduation last year, especially where students were coming up with lots of different ideas for things that they thought would work, and the university was saying no, they wouldn't work. And it was sort of, I think I felt it like the university was treating students as customers rather than partners in the whole process. And so students are being told this is what we're doing, but we're not being told why that's happening. And from my discussions with other students who were involved in the consultation, once they were actually involved, they understood the decision. They were happy with the decision because they sort of saw, okay, that was the university's only option. That was the best option. But when the university just goes out and says, this is what we're doing, and doesn't really engage with students who are suggesting things, who doesn't engage with students who are asking why, they just have a blanket thing, this is what we're doing, then that's where we start to get the backlash occurring. And so I guess I like to see that change of mentality where we're going from students as customers to students as partners, and the university community, especially considering students are pretty much the largest stakeholder and one of the two primary purposes of the university.
Excellent, thank you. So just to sum up the points that we've got so far, one is around a culturally safe environment. Another is around service in visibility. Third one is about harvesting the ideas that are sitting within the student body. And then the fourth is engaging with students in order to be able to get the communication right and have a shared understanding of our way forwards. We're getting some questions coming in, which I'll move to. I'm just going to explore one other area with Kathleen and Jackson. Both of you highlighted the importance of preparing graduates for their careers. Kathleen, your focus was on the issue of unpaid internships, and particularly for students with limited resources who have concomitant responsibilities. Could you talk us through why this is important and what you might think we may do to get some solutions towards this?
Yeah, so to me, this one seems like a bit of a no-brainer. Like, the whole concept of unpaid internships comes from a time when young men could go off and do unpaid work, but still live at home and be supported financially by their parents. So to me, it seems a little outdated. We've got a lot of students who don't have the financial support of their parents. I know people who are forced to live off $40 a fortnight because Centrelink pays for their accommodation on campus. So the only way for them to put food on the table is to have that casual employment. And then they're expected to take time off their casual employment to complete these unpaid placements, internships, work experience, whatever you call it. It just doesn't seem realistic for everyone, especially our single parents who, have to provide for their children as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I 100% agree that it is important to have industry experience before you graduate, 100%. But the current model that students are expected to abide by, it doesn't fit for everyone, and it does need reevaluation. there are business models out there, such as Career Trackers and the Aurora Foundation, that provide paid internships to First Nations students. So, I mean, I don't know the logistics, but maybe we need to look at what they're doing and kind of adopt a similar structure so that all of our students can get that industry experience before they graduate without having to sacrifice financial stability.
Really important points. You've got students that are time poor and poor and striving to undertake study and internships at the same time. Thank you very much. Jackson, your perspective on the preparation for careers was more focused on digital literacy, as it being a really key capability. Aren't students digital natives? How do we unpack that mythology around what we need to address in the understandings that people have around the students coming in now?
I think the idea that students are natives is sort of a half-truth. I think we are quite capable generally, but it's also to think about the various categories of students. You've got students who might not have grown up in a time with technology. You've got students who might not have had technology available to them when they were growing up. And I guess the idea of visual natives isn't a blanket catch-all, I can do everything on a computer. I've got plenty of friends and colleagues who are great with PowerPoint and Word, and they can draft up a good document, but if you tried to get them to make an Excel spreadsheet to save their lives, they couldn't. So it's about looking at it and trying to build up all the skills and sort of put everyone at the level where when they're going into work, they're capable of it. But it's also more than probably just about digital literacy, I think, in my mind. It's also about teaching content in a more practical manner. So using, because when we're going to go into the workforce, we're going to have all these digital technologies available to us. We're going to be able to Google search lots of answers. And still a lot of subjects are taught quite theory-based, and learn the theory, and that's what we'll test you on. And we've sort of discovered with the whole online exams now going on, that doesn't really work anymore, because when you're at home with an open book exam, if you're just testing theory, you can Google search after the answers. And that's going to be the same in the workplace. So it's about preparing people for the workplace where they can Google search the answers and teaching them about how to apply that so that when they get to employment, they're not having to actually learn the job there. We can actually teach some of those skills while they're at university. So once they get into the job, they are actually job-ready graduates. They're not just graduates who know the theory behind everything.
Or career ready, as I like to think. And also it's that sort of, how do you trust the source of your information? So how do you develop an understanding of the trusted source? Thank you for that, Jackson. Keval and Juliana, there's a question that's coming in from the floor, which is really focused on the experience of international students. And the issue around racism against international students having increased during the COVID pandemic. But they're worrying about whether or not this might be a structural feature of campuses in Australian universities. And are the universities doing enough to address this problem, really enhancing true intercultural conditions for international students? So the person who's posing the question is asking for your perspective on this. And what do you suggest UOW could do to address these issues? And whichever one of you wants to start first can start.
I can start, as I unmute myself first. I have to be honest that I had never gone through any kind of problems like this. I can be very fortunate, but I have a colleague who went through something really serious. And I was just, when she told me her story, I was just thinking about what would I do if I was in her position? What would be my reaction? And the answer is, I don't know. But one of the things that I would do is I would probably reach someone at the university and ask them, what can you do for me? Because this can cause a trauma. And I know that it did on her. And maybe ruin the whole experience of being abroad. And this is, for many of us, a dream, right? We are in another country. In my case, I'm at the other side of the world, and I brought my whole family with me. So it's just like a huge responsibility from myself, but it's also my dream. So I don't see anything being really done from the university in terms of all the racism and, you know, the problems that we face by being foreigners. I do feel that I'm an outsider every time I open my mouth. I've got a very strong accent and I'm very proud of it. I don't try to change it. This is who I am. But this is, I'm talking about from the perspective of a very mature student who's lived a lot. So it's just unfair that I compare myself with the young people that come and think about living the dream, and it just gets ruined. So the question is, no, I don't think much has been happening. And it's funny to see, and I'm sorry to be bringing this and be very provocative, but I'm sorry, Australia needs us. Right, we are the ones that Australia needs in terms of labor, but are we valued like this? Like, are we valuable for you the way we think we are? So yeah, Keval, if you want to just complete my thoughts.
I completely agree with you, Juliana. And I believe this is something that, you know, needs to be incorporated in early age for the kids. So there was an instance where I went to one remote village in Aubrey, and there were these little kids, and they had never seen a person with a darker complexion, and they were asking their parents, as in, why is this person dark? And it literally struck me, and they did not even know about any other religion other than Christianity. And I believe with the world opening up to, you know, more international people traveling being so easy in the current days, it should be really important for schools and early childhood education that they incorporate all these different cultures and beliefs in their education system. So if you start early, maybe when these kids, when they come to the uni, they might have a more holistic approach to them, you know, to their thinking skills. And also maybe we could devise something of something sort of a first aid, something similar to a mental first aid course that we have at the uni, or maybe the first respondent training that we have at the uni. We can devise something of that sort for international students or different cultures and you know, cultural backgrounds, which makes the students more aware about the different cultures that we have here at the university and globally in general. So maybe even some of these students might end up going to different countries. So they should not face a cultural shock when they go to those different countries, and they should be prepared. So yeah, that's what I believe.
Thank you so much for your candor. So I'm seeing from both of you, there's a need for the university to act, and that the university's action may actually impact on societal's reaction. So, you know, really helpful. Kathleen, there's a question for you, which is the person posing the question is applauding you for the eloquence of the way in which you spoke. And at the same time, sort of recognizing the importance of the support services that you receive from Woolloongabba, and wondering what lessons we can learn from the Woolloongabba approach to better support our international students.
Yeah, so thank you for saying that. I spoke eloquently. I feel like I'm really struggling to get my words out because of this like illness. But I can see the question here, and it says led by people who truly get it. And I think the only, like, I can't talk as an international, I'm not an international student. I cannot understand, like, you know, Juliana was talking about, she's moved here from a different country. She brought her whole family here. I can't understand the sacrifices that these people have, I guess, made to be here. I cannot, for the life of me, get that. So I think that's where it comes from, having people who understand what you've gone through to be here. Like, that's the only way you're going to get true support, is by having people who understand what you've been through. Obviously we have very multicultural, student body here. That is a lot of people you need to cover, but we need the effort. We need the effort put in, because there are people that are really struggling. They've come here from a different country, and they need their community here. You need that support. So, and I think that's the special thing about Woollyunga is it is a community. We're like a large, big family over there. So I think if those people who've traveled from across the world to be here have their little pocket of their own little family here, that would be incredible. But obviously I can't talk as an international student. So I would love, Kaval or Juliana's perspective on that as well.
Well, Juliana, do you have anything to add that you'd like to say?
I think that what you said about community is something that we've been trying to get, but because when you talk to an international student, so for example, when I was talking, I saw Kaval nodding and it said like, we feel the same. We all go through the same experiences. So I feel that the community of international students needed to be together and needed to be more united. And maybe we are counting on the university to help us getting this sense of belonging, and maybe we can get this from each other. However, what I see is the community is getting dispersed, but we've got the Indian community and we have the South American communities and at the end, we are all just one single community. What I'm afraid of is that we actually get more separated from the rest. So we get more separated from, for example, we've got the international students and the Australian students. And at the end of the road, we are all students. Right? We are craving for the same thing. We have lots in common as well. So what we could have and what I would expect from our university is just a better idea of how we can get this whole community together. Not only about international students and Australian students, but students themselves, always all together and supporting each other. I'm very although it's really nice to talk to someone who's feeling the same as you, who has the same experiences that you, positive or negative, it's good for you to have this sense of belonging to the place where you were living. That means Australia, right? So that's my idea.
Thank you, Juliana. I'm going to move to in a slightly different direction. I'm mindful that we're close to our time because we had 40 minutes for this session. Jackson, I'm going to call upon you. The question that's come in is, and this is based on your broad experience and the networks that you have with the students through your representation. But the question that's coming in is around how do academics really know when a student is struggling? And the person that's posing the question is making the point that quite often the student that is struggling is the stoic student. And it's very difficult to know whether or not that student is actually in trouble or not. So they're really sort of trying to unpack that and wondering whether or not you students have some perspectives on how we might do that better.
I think I see the question here. I'm sort of wondering if the question's also looking towards, I think, Kathleen's placement sort of area. And I think if it is towards the placement area and providing financial support to people on voluntary internships and stuff like that, I think the point that I'd like to get across is that probably we should be looking to how we can get rid of voluntary internships, not how we can provide financial support for students in them. It's how we can sort of promote the wider community to stop expecting free labor in a way, because while there are some voluntary internships that are rightfully voluntary, they're really about your education. There's a lot of them that are really just trying to get you to do a paid employment for free because they know the student has to get it done. And that's sort of where we need to look at drawing the line. And as a university who has a lot more power than a singular student who is told in their degree they have to do this to get their degree, how the university can support them to actually make the community stop expecting this sort of free placements. As far as in a wider sense, how you can understand when a student's struggling, I guess it is very hard, as recognised by the question, especially if the student doesn't sort of want to seek support. And in a way, it's got to be about letting them know about all the support services available more than just putting them in a short little thing in the subject outline that no one reads, because people do read the subject outline, hopefully, but they pay attention to the important parts like the due dates of the assessments, not necessarily the stuff that's on every single subject outline, because that's always the same. And it's about making sure they know it's okay to use the support services and it's not to be frowned upon, especially students coming from various backgrounds where it might originally be sort of expected that they don't need these services, to tell them that it is okay, and to not necessarily push them into it, but to sort of look for warning signs. We're now having all sorts of learning analytics coming up that you can use as well. So using the tools available to sort of identify students who might need help and trying to provide help, not in a pushy manner, but in a manner that's respectful to them.
I think that's a wonderful point to pause at, and Rich has just popped in, but it's that whole process of normalising services rather than waiting for students to put their hand up to ask for help. Thank you so much to all of you. Your points have been really well made. I agree with the audience that you've been eloquent in the way that you've posed your points. I look forward to ongoing work with you as always. And thank you, Rich, for the opportunity for us to do this.
Thank you all, and thank you for being so open and willing to take part in this. And I think all of your individual experiences have been, really influential in the discussions that we're having. So thanks again to everyone. We're going to take a short 5-minute break now as we prepare for our next panel. I'd advise everyone to take a quick break from your screen, have a stretch, and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Okay, thanks everyone. I hope we can all make our way back to the screen. If you've managed to take a stretch or take a quick break, we're going to start our second panel session now. And this second panel session will be all based around goal 2 of our strategic plan, which is creating knowledge for a better world, our research and innovation strategy. And I'm pleased to introduce Professor Clive Baldock, the Dean of Graduate Research, who will be here to moderate the session and introduce us to our panel. So thank you, Clive.
Well, thank you, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's panel discussion. As Rich said, I'm Dean of Graduate Research and I'm moderating the panel. This morning, our Vice Chancellor said that we can't change the past, we need to shift our focus to thinking about the future, and we're here to listen. So with that in mind, particularly this afternoon, we're listening to our panels. So our panel today comprises early career researchers and high degree research candidates whose biographies you've hopefully read, and they'll be reflecting on aspects of our research future over the next 30 to 40 minutes. And hopefully colleagues in the audience will feel able to put questions to our panel for discussion and exploration. So by way of reminder, and as Rich mentioned, goal 2 of our current strategic plan is creating knowledge for a better world, and more specifically, that the university be globally recognised for delivering impactful research that drives positive change. So with that in mind, I'll now invite our panel members to introduce themselves, say who they are, what they do, and from which part of the university they join us. So Erin, if you'd like to start, please.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a great honour. My name is Erin Twyford. I'm an ECR at the Faculty of Business and Law. I'm the chair of the university's Early Career Disruption Committee and also chair of my faculty's ECR network. I undertake critical research, so I look at the ways in which states use accounting to control, discipline, and regulate citizens in ways that inflict violence, suffering, and death. And I look at specifically vulnerable populations. So my research has looked at Jewish people during the Holocaust, refugees, and the elderly.
Thank you, Erin. Catherine, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name's Catherine Moyle. I'm a PhD student and also research assistant with Jindola and with the Blue Futures Project. I also have a community hat on as well, which will come out at some point, I'm sure. So I'm on the board of Land Council, which is moving to more and more into sort of a community-driven research space. So I'm sure that I'll cross between goal 2 and goal 3 because everything's connected. Start there.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Yanan Lee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Lee, and I just completed my PhD study in the School of Computing and Information Technology, Faculty of EIS. And I was the president of UPA and a postgraduate representative in the University Council. And I'm currently the postdoc research fellow in the same school. And my research interest is the blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So later, I think I'd like to share some of my perspective as an international HDR student and ECR and a female researcher in engineering. Thank you.
Thank you, Yan. Jolie. We can't hear you, Jo. Could you turn your mute off?
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Zhi I'm an ARC Decker Fellow from the Institute for Superconducting and Electronic Materials and AIM, UOW. I was the VC Fellow from 2016 to 2019. I moved to UOW and being employed in research-only positions by UOW. And I mainly worked on several projects, including the UW node of the ARC Center of Excellence in Future Low Energy Electronics Technologies. My research aimed to find the materials where the unique low energy loss properties works at a higher temperature for application in future electronic devices to save energy and build more powerful computers. I also aim to become a good teacher. I have volunteered taught some courses at AIM and the School of Physics. Thank you.
Thank you, Zhe. And Bethany, if you'd like to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Clive, and thanks for the invitation to be on the panel, Richard. My name's Bethany Hoy, and I'm currently a DECRA Research Fellow in the School of Earth, Atmospheric and Life Sciences. And before that, I was a lecturer there, and I will go back to that when I'm done. I come to this having also been a co-director for a research centre within the faculty for the last 3 years, and having done postdocs and PhD overseas, both in Europe and the US. And so I feel like the thing that I would bring is that everywhere has really good points about it. And I'd really like to focus on the good things that I've seen in other places and how we can bring those together to make UOW better, rather than focusing on things that aren't right.
Great. Thank you, Bethany, and thank you, panelists, and we look forward to an interesting discussion. I would encourage colleagues in the audience to provide questions which our panel will engage with towards the end of the session. I'm going to start by turning to Erin as chair of the Early Career Research Committee and Network. Erin, Jenny Martin, our Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, said in her short video for this event that we currently live in a so-called VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. However, the solution, Jenny says, is also VUCA: vision, understanding, clarity and agility. So with that in mind, Erin, what would your vision be for our current and future researchers and research more broadly in the university?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It definitely is an interesting time that we're living in. And I think that COVID has really exacerbated some of the underlying issues that were already present within academia. These issues then became more prevalent in our working life and environment and have inevitably impacted on our productivity and our research. So my vision for current and future researchers is really to safeguard time for research. I think COVID has especially shown us just how valuable time is as a resource. I think for some, they may have been given more from working at home, but others far less, as those boundaries between home and work became really blurred. Personally, I found that all of the other functions, services and tasks that are part of being an academic just exploded, and trying to find time for research was extraordinarily difficult. So if as a university we want to remain competitive, research world leaders, we have to ensure that staff have the appropriate work culture to conduct meaningful research. And for me, I think a way to start is by acknowledging and valuing our work as academic citizens. So an academic citizen is sort of somebody who does external and internal service work to support the infrastructure of the university and also to support the wider civic mission. And I think this comes down to values such as engagement, care, guardianship, loyalty, collegiality, and specifically this includes all those activities that we can't really or don't really get accounted for. So I'm talking about peer reviews of manuscripts, conference attendance, organisation, reviewing, presenting, guest editorships, mentoring of colleagues, engaging with industry and professional bodies, examining PhD theses. I mean, there's so much that is part of this job that we do. So I think here we have a really unique opportunity to be more understanding, clear, agile and visionary, to really foster a culture of academic collegiality and collaboration that really appreciates but also nurtures academic citizenship. And I think particularly among ECRs who are representing the future of the institution. So, you know, this VUCA world could be achieved by including academic citizenship as part of perhaps the academic performance framework or embedding these activities within our workload models. So I think our current workload models really constrain our research because, well, I think they're a little bit inequitable. I don't think they display to the level that's needed to account the actual time that takes to complete things. And I don't think that is really going towards those ideals in the strategic plan of being really inclusive and diverse. And I think this is particularly the case when we come to the invisible work of academic citizenship, which more often than not is carried out by women, minorities, and ECRs. So already overworked staff are kind of penalised in a way for being good academic citizens. So, you know, as I said, I'm in accounting, and I know that anything that's not accounted for not only goes unnoticed and unvalued, but the time it takes away from other things like research is just not acknowledged. I think that ECRs are especially hard hit because we don't have the ability to be in those research and governance roles that secure teaching relief. So we're trying to do so much while attending to carer responsibilities, work-life balance, while, you know, meanwhile we're living in a pandemic. So what the effect is that ECRs are experiencing burnout more regularly, and other ECRs are leaving academia altogether. And, you know, that may be true more broadly across the university. I can only speak to what I see in the different roles I have. So I think as a university, we have to really safeguard against this exodus. And we have, you know, had some really meaningful initiatives such as the Pearl Fellowships and the Reader Grants that are going towards achieving this. But I think we really have to look at the expectations and allocation of work within workload models, which I think will inevitably lead to better retention of staff and then less burnout. So therefore we'll have more productive staff producing great research who feel valuable and also really seen in the work that they do.
Great, thank you, Erin. You raise a lot of very important points there, which we'll prize apart. And everything you say, of course, is the challenge is even greater during COVID, of course. It adds to everything you've said. I'm going to ask now Yanan Lee to give her perspective on the future challenges for us. You come with your perspective as a ex-PhD student and now researcher in the institution. So perhaps if you'd like to share what your vision is for the future for research and researchers.
I'd like to share some of my points as the international HDR students while just undertaking so many students and governance responsibility, because many people are interested in which is why I'm so active in the university governance and student events and just what motivated me to get involved. So for me, I think just I'm really honored and really appreciated to have such an experience. And I think I just learned just quite a lot from the roles that I undertake. And I think I'm really happy to collect students' requirements and more than happy to help them. And I think just after doing all of this, I think I have a better understanding to the whole uni and the governance and the culture. So I feel connected and I have the sense of belongings to the school and the uni. And it's just like I feel responsible, I need to do something and to devote myself and contribute something to have a better university. And this also just makes me keep motivated in my research. I need to work hard not only to achieve my degree, but also I need to do something and do just more in my research topic to have more research advances to enhance the university rankings and impact. So this is the way I think I can contribute to the uni. And also I think from my experience, I think we can provide more opportunities for students, especially for international students, to know more about the uni governance and culture, to feel them to have the sense of belongings. I think this is really important, especially for international HDR students, because I know just many HDR students just spend most of their time just in the office. So I think this is this will help the HDR students to have a better campus life and also have more research outcomes in their subjects.
Thank you, Jan. And yeah, a lot of important points you've raised there. And it's very important that we do have a view and a perspective on HDR candidates. Notice I say candidates and not students. We look at our PhD students as our very early career researchers. So we consider them as research colleagues. Very important. Bethany, what's your perspective on the future for research and researchers in our university?
I think Erin made excellent points about time. Research doesn't happen without time, and research is kind of that that fungible thing that people will, because they're passionate about it, do at night and do on their weekends. But like Erin said, there are a lot of people who can't do nights and weekends. There are people who can't keep stretching their time. And so on top of all of the points that Erin made, I would also seek there to be some clear prioritization between the education and the research arms. So in my faculty, we saw this year not only a pivot to online learning in 2020 and a pivot back to needing as much as possible back on campus again, but in the midst of that, we're forced to have a first year put in, and on top of that, we're now having extra initiatives in teaching that have to come online in 2022. And so all of those extra teaching initiatives have these death by 1,000 cuts effects on research. So there needs to be a really solid case for the justification for those teaching initiatives. And when they've been put on, which they have in spades to the best of people's ability, some pushback to see that time needs to be allocated to research to keep the prestige of the university up. The other thing that I think that really sets UOW apart is its diversity. So we're a very small institution on the whole. If you look at any single school or department, they're made up of a nexus of a handful of people who each work on very different areas, and collectively they're more than the sum of their parts. And there's a bit of a push nationally in our non-G8 universities to go for specializations and stack teams in particular areas. But UOW has done exceptionally well in our community impact, but also on basic metrics like ERA rankings across a swathe of the research that we do. And I think valuing that diversity that each individual brings and each individual research discipline brings by being small and diverse is a key to UOW's ongoing success.
Great, very, very good points there, Bethany. Thank you very much. I'm going to now turn to Catherine. Catherine, you're a PhD researcher, and you bring to this conversation also an Indigenous perspective from your various perspectives. So what's your view on the future for the university in terms of research and our researchers?
Yeah, so it's one of potential, I think. I've listening to Stan Grant this morning and his parting comments around the importance of providing our students with opportunities to actually engage with and come into appreciation and relationship with Indigenous knowledges. We're fortunate at the University of Wollongong to have Jindola, the program. But given that this is a research panel, I want everyone to think beyond sort of the obvious, the teaching implications. And for those of you who have participated in the program, for those of you who are in contact and in relationship with people who've participated, there's a definite shift in the relationship with knowledges and the relationship between knowledges as well, which has an impact on research. So for me, it's really about centering and foregrounding Indigenous protocols and principles, all of the ologies within our research, and providing those spaces for collaboration. I'd like to see personally Indigenous principles and embedded more in our ethics as well. So again, the principles of respect, responsibility and reciprocity, which underpin most of the way, like the way that we operate and the way that we do research. I feel like there's a lot to be learned in those spaces as well. As an Indigenous HDR student, I feel that it's an issue around Australia that we need to address. And we have this opportunity to do it here at University of Wollongong, where we've been losing Indigenous HDR students to other campuses, or to other institutions. But rather than just stopping or stemming the flow out, actually increasing numbers, so participation and completion rates as well. I'm inspired and a bit jealous when I talk to colleagues up at SCU up in Lismore, for instance, and I hear about the fact that they're PhDs in Indigenous philosophies and being able to actually create rules which meet the academic requirements, but allow Indigenous students who are researching using Indigenous philosophies to actually respond in a culturally appropriate way. So be that through artifact and exegesis or without actually being in the creative arts faculty. So for me, there's a whole heap of potential really in this time. As an aside, and I know that people have talked about during the day and over the last few months in particular about the need to heal. So the work that's being done around trauma-informed practice, particularly through SMAR, but I'd like to see that sort of a lens actually coming into play in the way that we research, in the way that we manage staff, in the way so across all levels of the university. I feel that there's space as well for us to actually explore the way that we can research with a trauma-informed lens.
Right, thank you, Catherine. Very thought-provoking in everything you've said there. Julie, what's your perspective on the future of research and researchers in the university?
I'm a research only. I'm in a research only position, so I committed almost all my time on researches. And in past 7 years, after I joined UW, I found the research environment is excellent, and we have very good facilities. And I'm very lucky to get mentored by several good mentors from AIM and School of Physics, and it's very good. And in the future, I think there may be I think it will be good if there are more connection between research and teaching. For me and for many other early career researchers in AIM, we 100% focused on research, and but our research results usually did not convey to PhD students or other or undergraduate students or master students. So I think in the future, if there are more opportunities for us to participate in teaching or something, or maybe lecturing to undergraduate students, will be good. And I think there will be benefit to both students and both to us as early career researchers, early career researchers. For students, it's because we have first-hand research experiments. I think we can teach them how to use knowledge learned on textbook to apply on real research. And for us as early career researchers, I think most academic positions requires abilities of both teaching and research. But for us, for research only early career researchers, we only have a research profile. We don't have much teaching experiments. That was my hope in the future for the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Very, very interesting points there. I'd like to ask a question now to all of you. HDR candidates, so PhD students and Masters by Research students or researchers, are the lifeblood of the institution. They undertake a lot of the research, and that informs what the university is as a research institution. What does the panel think in terms of us providing the right experience and right training and development for our future PhD graduates when they go on to positions and careers after they leave the university? Yanin, Lee, if you'd like to start with that.
Hi, from my perspective, I think that is quite important. Like, for example, if to do the research, there are some, even if we are in different topics, even if we are in different research interests, but there are some just something in common to do research, like how we do the literature review, how we find a new idea. There's some just similarity in finding these ways in different topics. And I think to train a HDR student or a future potential researcher. I think this is quite important. But I must say, like, because we can have different, like, different ways to for your future. Like, you can, for example, you can do something in the company. You can still continue your career in the university. So this there's also some difference. But I think if you just continue your career of research, then that is more important. But if you just for example, you want to do something in the company as the software developer, or there may be some difference, like requirements, I mean, from different companies. So, but just still important to just like the ability to study, and the ability to just learn some new models or new methods. This is my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanan. Catherine, as a PhD researcher, what should we be doing differently with regards to preparing our future PhD graduates to go out into the world?
It's tricky for me. I always explain I'm a practitioner first and a amateur troublemaker. So my PhD is a ticket to actually making trouble professionally in the fields that I play. For me, again, sort of, if I can bring it back to an Indigenous perspective, so we talk about careers, and there's that aspect of it. It's, I guess, guidance and support in actually looking at ways that we can continue contributing to community, because ultimately that's who my responsibility is to. It's to community and to the knowledges that are unfolding. There's also, as an Indigenous HDR student, I feel I have a very real responsibility to our undergraduate students as well. So, and part of that community. And that's something that, and I know I've gone off topic, sorry, Clive, but it's something that really sort of needs to be balanced. But I feel there's that aspect as well, that we're in context where everything's related and everything's interconnected. So we really need to look at the way that all of these things sort of play together and the way that they contribute together. So again, at this point in time, when I'm in lockdown and I've got 4 children in the house and I'm sitting out on the stairs, my focus is on sort of ways that I can continue to contribute to community, and finding the pathways and the opportunities to actually have the voice there, and to bring voice of community back in to the academy as well. So that's part of my academic and part of my career, sort of my journey that I see. Sorry, I hope that made sense.
That's fine, Catherine. Look, thank you very much for that. Erin, as an early career researcher, what should we be doing more specifically for training and development to enable our early career researchers to thrive and be successful and go on to reach their full potentials?
I mean, I think this sort of harks back to my earlier point of academic citizenship. So I think great mentoring of ECRs will also ensure that we are having this prolific academic citizenship culture. If we have these mentors that are really reinforcing the broad role that faculties play in furthering teaching and research for the public good, and having these mentors role model for us, the not just the academic part of being an academic, but the broader public service notion and the mission of the university to the public. I think that's really important. I think that we need to look at it not just in terms of academia, but in terms of life. So as we said, you know, we're preparing our HDR students and our HDR candidates and our students for life, not just careers or whatever else. And so I think also coming from a place of great empathy is really important. It's probably one of the most important things I was taught by my supervisors, and it's now something I carry with me. Everything else you can kind of teach. You can teach people to be great researchers and be really productive, but if they aren't empathetic and good citizens of the world and of the university more specifically, then we're not going to move forward together. We're just going to have these siloed people performing quite well while others are being left behind. And I think there are lots of opportunities to embed great mentoring, and sometimes this may require us, I think Stan Grant said this morning, that we need to embrace the uncomfortable ideas. And a lot of people might be uncomfortable in pursuing other avenues to get to great research rather than trying to just get there straight away. But in doing so, we can think a little bit differently and position UOW a little bit differently as well.
Great, thank you, Erin. I'm going to change the conversation in a slightly different direction in the brief time we've got left. Bethany, one of the aspirations of the Commonwealth Government is for us to be in universities more industry engaged and more commercial. What's your reflection as a DECRA research fellow with regards to industry engagement and more commercialisation? And what should that look like in the future for the university?
That's thanks, Clive, because one of the points that I had was really a need to re-establish community trust in the value of universities as institutions. And Stan touched on that this morning, where there is a bit of a dichotomy. If things are purely industry driven, then you end up often down a rabbit hole serving a small problem, and it takes a very well experienced researcher to be able to broaden out from that specific thing that industry wants you to do in order to generate knowledge that's of broader use to society more generally for the long term. And so I think there has to be at the university level some balancing of the government push for research and seeing that there is huge value in industry and bringing large groups of industry together, because there are so many different perspectives. Say, I'm currently working on antimicrobial resistance, and we're trying to pull together partners looking at how it might influence agriculture as a key export sector, but that needs us to look at waste management and water management and government policies surrounding how we deal with water. And so the partners that need to come into our research are often quite broad, but that doesn't apply. And we do need to have some university and institutional push back on that. And one way in which that's really clearly illustrated to me is if you turn on the TV at any point and look at any talk show on a commercial or a government channel, you will see an expert brought in. And that expert might be an expert in American industrial relations or in Middle Eastern politics or in epidemiology or whatever else. But we do as a society really value expertise, but there's a disconnect between wanting that expertise to give us information directly and valuing the institutions more generally. And I think we need to work on that disconnect.
Thank you, Bethany. I'm conscious of we've got 5 minutes left, and I wondered if we've got any questions coming through. Let's look at our questions. No questions I can see at the moment. Have we got any questions from anyone? I'm sure you must have questions. If not, I'm going to ask you, Julie, to reflect on industry engagement and what we should be doing more into the future.
Firstly, I don't have a first-hand experience in industry-related research. I think to be success, I think currently I'm preparing the linkage project to be. It's an ARC project that will connect between the ARC supported funding and the corporations supported research. So for industry, I don't have much experience, but I think the problem is I just want to say some problem why it's a little bit hard, because I think there are some very hard problems to be solved. The industry already know that, and as a researcher we also know that. But usually we are lacking. There's lack of the very feasible way to solve the problem. At least a very feasible way in very near future. So it's also a question for me. I don't have a good answer.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Julie. I'm going to ask Catherine, in terms of the broader issues in the short time we've got left, the broader issues, what should we be doing more in terms of equity, diversity and inclusion in terms of research and HDR candidates?
It's a huge question with only a couple of minutes left, Clive. Yeah, I think coming back again to to bring it back to Jindola again, which is all about the way that knowledges sort of interact and valuing and honouring the contribution that different knowledges bring to place. From an Indigenous perspective, from an Aboriginal perspective, you know, it's again about the contribution that each individual brings. So there's again those principles that I mentioned before of respect, responsibility and reciprocity, which if they become our basic operating framework, you know, and if we adopt Erin's point there about empathy, you know, if we pick that up and Trish in her article recently talked about kindness, I think all of these things come back to the same place. They're all from the same starting point. If we approach everything that we do, including ourselves and our relationships with our data, with our knowledge, with our participants, our communities, with our peers, with those, you know, encapsulating those principles, then we'll achieve that diversity that we and the equity that we aspire to have within the institution. So it's about finding ways to actually embody and enact that wherever possible. Happy when we're available face to face to yarn with anyone as I walk around, except on Wednesdays because that's my PhD day.
Great, thank you very much, Catherine. We've got a couple of minutes left. There are some questions that have come through, so we'll have to be quick on answering the questions. I'm going to go to Gersha Lishi. Thank you for all of you for generously sharing your perspectives and ideas. Can you please tell us what worked and what didn't work during your PhD journey? Yanin, very briefly.
Yeah, but I think for me, just the motivation is the most important thing. That's because I think maybe responsibility is also important. Like you need to, like for me, like I need to work on my research. I need to achieve my degree, but I think the inspiration is also important. So that is what I am talking about. Like I need to have the sense of feeling, sense of belongings, and I need to feel connected, and I want to do it. I feel more than happy to do it, and I'd like to devote myself to the uni to do some more like research outcomes.
Thank you very much, Ayan. And the very last question to Erin, very briefly, Erin, you've got 1 minute. It's a question regarding early career researchers. People feel they need to take on so much. Do you think positive mentors can play a role in this? How can we change this culture? 1 minute.
Yes, I do. I think sometimes we need to be given permission to say no, and sometimes that needs to come from somebody like a mentor. Sometimes it's really hard to say no because you feel like you're missing out on an opportunity, or you're letting someone down, or you might feel a little bit precarious as an ECR to say no. So I think if you get that permission from somebody in a more senior position who's modeling for you good practice, then you can feel a little bit more empowered to say no. It's still very, very difficult, and you do feel like you're letting people down, but it's also very important to look after yourself and not take on too much, because there's always something happening in academia. There's always too much to do. So just, again, be really kind to yourself.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you, panel. Been a very interesting conversation. May I suggest the questions that have been put in the chat, the question and answer section rather, if colleagues would like to put them into the WebEx session online, then colleagues could engage in the exchange of ideas regarding those questions. So thank you very much, and over to you, Rich.
Thank you so much, Clive, and thank you to the panel. That was another great discussion. Really appreciate your time and taking part in this. So we're going to give everyone now another 5-minute break to stretch your legs, get a bit of time away from the screen. And when we come back, it'll be our final panel, community panel. So see you in 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back everyone. I hope you've had an opportunity to take a quick break and stretch. We're on to our final panel of the day. I'm really excited to introduce this one. And we've got we've got a panel of our community partners, industry partners and alumni for Goal 3, Making a Difference for Our Communities. The moderator for this session will be Dr. Nancy Huggett, who is the executive manager, Office of the Senior Deputy Vice Chancellor. So I'm going to ask Nancy to come on board and then for our panelists to join us.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Lovely to be here. As Richard said, I'm starting a new role, which I'm very lucky to have because it involves our Goal 3 of our strategic plan, which is about making a difference to our communities and the associated civic university strategy. Some of the main themes in this area are equity, diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and our community and industry partnerships and engagement. So our communities are geographical about Wollongong City itself, but also our fantastic regional campuses on the South Coast and Southern Highlands, our campuses in Sydney metropolitan area, and our international communities in our campuses in Dubai, Malaysia and Hong Kong. So when we talk about communities and partnerships, we're talking about multiple localities and also the communities that are within each of these areas. And a key aspect to making a difference is in listening to what our communities need and working together on initiatives that can contribute to mutual goals and to things which can really make a difference in our society. So we're really lucky this afternoon to be joined by 4 panelists from our community, industry and alumni areas who have a matrix of links and associations with the University of Wollongong. We're going to do things a little bit differently for this panel. We're going to give each of our panelists about 5 minutes to have a bit of a chat about their community roles, their experience with the university, and also how they'd hope to see UOW working with them and their organisations in the future to help achieve our mutual goals. So if you have any burning questions, just to repeat, just please use the Q&A section in the Zoom link and not the chat so that we can keep a track of it. And if we have more questions than we can answer, then we'll endeavour to collect them up and respond to you afterwards, because these are some really great issues that we'll be dealing with this afternoon. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panellist, who many of you will know, which is Jo Golding. So Jo was recently UOW's Reconciliation Action Plan Manager and is now Director of the New South Wales Aboriginal and Islander Childcare with early years support and the Secretariat of the Aboriginal Islander Childcare. Jo has extensive project management experience inside and outside of government in the areas of strategic planning and programming in health, justice and the vet sectors. Jo is a Bidjigal woman from La Perouse and now is living on Gundagara country in the Southern Highlands. So Jo, thanks so much for coming back, and over to you.
Thanks for that intro, Nancy. I'm really grateful to be here. I'd like to start by acknowledging country first before I begin and just pay my respects to our elders past and present. And I'm coming from Gundagara country, as you said, this afternoon in the Southern Highlands. When I was asked to sit on this panel with UOW, I didn't hesitate, and it was for 3 reasons that I didn't hesitate to jump at the chance to do so. The first was that I'd built up some amazing relationships and some trust with the staff here over time with the university. The second reason was that we have some new and amazing leadership in Trish, and on her first day with the university, she asked for truthful conversations during a ceremony at Wollongonga. The third reason is because I really do believe that the university has the ability and the opportunity to advance in the space and to build some realistic goals and invest in Aboriginal outcomes in all areas of its business activities. I guess I'll start with my role with the university. I was employed as a reconciliation action plan manager to assist in the implementation of the reconciliation action plan. My relationship stretched across the university. Do you want me to continue, or are you going to introduce the rest of the panel?
Yes, please, Jo, that would be great. You've got 5
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm switching between screens here, so.
No worries.
So my current role that I have now is with SNAKE. They're the peak body and the National Secretariat voice for our children that have reached into the federal government. My reason for exiting the uni wasn't for anything other than an awesome career opportunity for myself. So I really did enjoy my journey at the university. My relationships with the university have continued, and I believe they will continue into the future. Currently, I'm actually negotiating to sit on site at Innovation Campus in the smart space, and having some negotiations with finance for some pro bono contribution to support my staff. I guess I see great value in UOW and its student offering moving forward for the sector that I'm now working in, and more broadly in the community, and most certainly within the New South Wales state in my current role. And I intend to continue to promote UOW by way of student pathways and to work with the Early Start unit on sector development. I'm really keen to explore opportunities that I can have with them. And I'm a postgrad student enrolled here now, so you'll probably see a little bit more of me. I guess within my role, I was primarily employed to assist individuals, faculties, divisions, and entities across the whole of university. So my journey was not just isolated to a particular area. At the time of onboarding, to be honest, I really felt as though I had bought a ticket on the Titanic. I started in January in 2019 on the back of the tragic bushfires, and 6 weeks in, the pandemic hit and we were in lockdown before I knew it. I did actually feel very much like a square peg in a round hole, but I was fortunate enough to make some great connections through that journey with some amazing staff that shared some insight into the operations of the uni, and also shared their own journey, which gave me a little bit of hope. It wasn't easy to socialise the notion of reconciliation during that time, particularly because the university was pivoting in many directions to keep its business activities moving and to operationalise online. So it was a rather difficult transition. I guess that said, the strategy itself, or the Reconciliation Action Plan, is a huge cumbersome plan. It has 5 pillars, 14 deliverables, and 14 actions and 78 individual deliverables. These were really quite difficult to operationalise during that time, particularly where items had funding attached to them. I think I can share with you, though, during that time, the resilience of staff, I guess, and for the institution, were that we were able to get some really good wins along the way. Some of these were in the development of an employment strategy. A couple of positions we were able to employ some Aboriginal staff along that journey. And as I worked through the plan and started to unpick it, I realised that although the plan was really quite aspirational in the Aboriginal space, there were some significant gaps in the underpinning frameworks, I guess, that could operationalise the activities that it had outlined. Some of these were in the areas of cultural safety, and this was further highlighted as I made my conversations and my journeys with different RAP champions and other staff that were very keen and eager to operationalise the RAP outcomes. We developed some strategies within these frameworks and had set them aside and tried to mobilise them. But the difficulty was that there were some systems that were not conducive with allowing these frameworks to connect to these outcomes within the RAP. And I soon realised that the strategies and plans that we developed during this time were really only of value if they had achievable goals, objectives and systems that were clearly defined to operationalise them and connect them in. And also that we really required genuine and sincere buy-in from the top. One of the areas highlighted for me were in the space of Aboriginal employment here at the university. The university is a large employer in the Illawarra area, and it has a reasonably significant Aboriginal population at its disposal. But the target that it sets of 3% has never been met. I think that the university has set this target aligned with some of its reporting responsibilities. But I think if we're to be real about reconciliation and outcomes in the Aboriginal space, that we need to really consider our goals and our targets that are in line with what we're able to achieve. The University of Wollongong also take a significant number of enrolments, and that's bolstered by the strength of Woolloongabba and what it has to offer. They have a really good reputation in the student space, but unfortunately the staff at the university don't necessarily stick around. One of the factors to consider are in the area of cultural safety at the university, and I can share with you that this has been experienced by students and staff, and it also goes both ways. I think that Aboriginal staff at UOW are confronted with racism rather regularly. I have heard this directly from staff and students, so I think that there's a lot of work to be done in that space. I think also to consider, if the university is to address this, it needs to look at the interaction with its broader community and visitors coming into the university. A number of my colleagues were involved in some interactions with some visitors into the university that made some very derogatory comments. So I think that if we're really serious about reconciliation and addressing outcomes for Aboriginal people, we need to start with some very basic cultural safety training, some guidelines and some frameworks. I also think that we need to consider the safety of all staff. Some of the conversations that I can share that I've had with staff moving around the university, there are so many really keen and eager staff to lean into the space and to really mobilise Aboriginal outcomes, and they're a little bit fearful. So that was a common theme, and I think that some staff have been burnt when they've tried to lean in and do the right thing but have actually done the wrong thing. So I think something that's really lacking, I guess, is some policy and protocol around that interaction. And I think to take seriously your Aboriginal advisory groups and, you know, I guess address these issues with the advisory group as a collective, and not put the expectation on one individual staff member that may be working within your faculty or division as the go-to person on all matters Aboriginal. So I think that that was a lesson that I learnt moving through the university. Having said that, I think that the university is in a really, really good position to make some change and to actually innovate in the Aboriginal space. You've got some great staff and some wonderful programs at UOW. You've got Jindola that's reaching into curriculum and also, you know, working with divisions on business activities, you know, how we consider Aboriginal ways of doing and being in our business activities. I think that that's, you know, something to really leverage off and look at the strengths that the university has to offer, and where it's really competitive. I think they are probably two of the key areas: the student support and your ability to have a program that throws a lens across and, you know, works with the curriculum, changing curriculum offerings within UOW. I think that another area that the university could really leverage is in the area of Aboriginal procurement. I think that the space is certainly an area that offers communities the ability to interact in the economy, and interacting in the procurement space actually empowers communities. It adds value to communities. Many Aboriginal businesses and, you know, mainstream businesses have CSR and social impact commitments, most of which are targeting Aboriginal communities. So, you know, I think that there's a lot of opportunity here to make some change and set some really great goals and work together with your internal and your external stakeholders. Yeah, thanks, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Jo, for your candid comments. It shows a lot of strength. It's really useful for us to get that, and also for the great suggestions about solutions in all different kinds of operational, academic, student spaces that we can put through. Thank you. We'll, if we have time, we'll come back to Jo later, but I'd also like to introduce our next panellist, who is Barry Irvin AM. Barry's recognised across the world for his experience in the dairy industry, and he's been chair of Bigger Cheese Limited since 2000, which has seen the industry, his Bigger Cheese company, go from national to international strength. Barry's the recipient of numerous awards, including in 2008 when he was made a member of the Order of Australia for his contribution to the Australian dairy industry, but also for his contribution to children with a disability. Barry's very keen and aware about the importance of social responsibility and giving back to the community. He's been chair of Giant Steps, an organisation that provides services to children and young adults with autism since 2002. And also through Bigger Cheese, Barry is involved in a really interesting and ambitious sustainability project, which I hope he's going to talk about for us, which is about transforming the Bega Valley into an exemplar of circular economy. So it's really exciting for us. So Barry, welcome and thanks for joining us. Oh, and you're on mute. Should be just, yeah, well done.
Thanks, Nancy, and apologies for that. You'd think after 18 months I'd be, I wouldn't even make that mistake, but there you go. No, corporate leaders aren't always that intelligent, but look, it's lovely to be here and lovely to speak with you, and certainly lovely to speak to you from the Bega Valley. And look, I will just take a minute. I never like sort of blowing the trumpet of the company too much, but I think sometimes people don't realise what's in their backyard, and it was notable to me even in terms of some of the interactions we've had with Wollongong Uni beyond those that know us well. They tend to think of us as this little cheese company in the Bega Valley that makes very good cheese and obviously sells it in Australia and in other countries around the world. But in fact, Bega Cheese has grown. So when I joined, I think we had about 60 staff, and we're very much just located in the Bega Valley with the farmers of the Bega Valley as a cooperative. We've grown now to have, I think, about 4,200 staff across the country, with 20 manufacturing facilities, largely in regional communities, which I think is very important. So, you know, because in terms of I think where you can genuinely make and feel the difference is when you operate in the regions. And we sell to around 40 countries around the world. So we're our revenue next year will be a little over $3 billion, and we will, and hopefully as you're shopping, you will remember to buy your Vegemite, which I'm sure is not a very hard sell, but Bega Cheese was the company that brought Vegemite back to Australia. So we bought Vegemite a few years ago, but perhaps as you call into the service station to get petrol, you should buy just a Dare iced coffee or a Dairy Farmers bottle of milk, or indeed a Farmers Union or Yoplait yogurt or a Juice Brothers juice. Make sure you buy some peanut butter that you know we've got from our farmers up in central Queensland, etc. So it is indeed a company that has a lot of household brands that people don't realise. Its head office remains in Bega. So as somebody once very I think was great insight said to me, because I wasn't thinking about it myself, that a town of 5,000 people now owns two of Australia's most favoured brands in Bega Cheese and Vegemite, and many, many others. And so it does show you that you can do it from the regions, and you can be very successful in doing it. And the way I think about making a difference is it's about the difference of providing opportunity in the regions, creating employment, creating paths to greater and greater success. You know, I love the fact that Wollongong Uni has a campus in Bega, because, you know, when I was growing up here, the option was to leave. You know, and what we really want to do is try and keep our people in our communities and keep our communities vibrant and growing, and thinking about all the subject matter that Joe's just mentioned earlier, but much more than that. So we've been delighted as a company to grow. I mean, like from my perspective, I could obviously talk a lot about the company, but I think it's more what that success can then allow you to do that makes a difference, and it makes it. And, you know, as I say, we sell our products in about 40 countries around the world. Up until COVID, of course, that difference included giving people opportunities internationally as well as in Australia. So there's a great many parallels around the value of growth and the value of actually creating a successful business, and then it's how you behave as you create that business, and it's how you behave with the opportunities that business gives you, and that's always been my belief. I mean, interestingly, I'll come back to our association with the University of Wollongong in a moment, but for me, I always say I've got two jobs. Both of them are important, but I rank my job at Giant Steps as chairing Giant Steps as the most important job I do, because in that light, it's now become a very large charity. We started it with 6 staff 25 years ago, interestingly enough, mostly because my very profoundly autistic son had nowhere to go. So 25 years ago, there wasn't a school that would accept him, not even a special school that would accept him. He was on that profound end of the spectrum with, he had no language, he had significant developmental delay, he self-injured very badly, and was highly anxious. And the best offer we could get, which ironically enough was out of the specialist autism school in Sydney, that said they could take him for an hour a week. And so hence Giant Steps was born along, because I wasn't the only family in that situation. There was a small group of six parents that had similar children. And so we created Giant Steps, and we all knew that we came from a position of some level of resource that could actually be ambitious enough to think about doing that. But the one thing that we wanted to be sure of is that if we were going to create a facility that could look after children on that absolutely profound end of the spectrum, and even to this day, most of our enrolments are children that their school placing has failed, even in other special schools, or their children that were getting out of lockdown hospital facilities where they've been put in a lockdown facility for their own safety, and so what we wanted to make sure we did was actually create a school which turned into a primary school, but then it turned into a secondary school, then it turned into a post-school service, and then a mental health clinic, and a whole lot of other services, both in Sydney and Melbourne. But we wanted to make sure that this was open to everybody. So we made the promise to ourselves that we would charge no fees, and we would ask many people in the community to help at all from all walks of life. And so maybe to put a number on that, which unfortunately people like me tend to do, I think our first year we needed to raise $130,000. This year we will need to raise $7 million, because we've continued to grow, and we've continued to, ironically enough, have this business model that says we will be open to all children that are in this sort of level of need where there isn't an alternative, and their families, and we obviously look to support their families as well. So that's been a long-term community commitment by me, motivated by my son, but obviously now motivated by having that experience and knowing that if you can help others, you should. And indeed, I was fortunate enough to be in the position both corporately as I was growing bigger, and in terms of my own personal skills to be able to do that. So I think I've always, because I think I grew up I'm a dairy farmer's son, who was a dairy farmer's son, who was a dairy farmer's son, with 6 generations of dairy farmers. I grew up in a little town outside Bega called Bamboka, which has about a population of 200. And for it was all about community. So we didn't like Bega very much because their football team always beat us, but that's by the by. What I grew up knowing was that if you needed the recreation ground ready for the game next week, you needed to go and do that with yourself. You needed to go and work with the local service clubs. You needed to help people. So I've taken that view of the way you create strength is to behave as a community and a community together. And you bring together ideally all personalities, all beliefs, all our walks of life, and you create something special. That's what we're doing, and I realize I'm going a little over time, but that's what we're doing with the circular economy. So the Bega Valley, it's unique. There's 2 streams that have their catchments in the area and dump out to sea, and there's only 2 roads in and out. We can measure everything. So we are looking to we're looking to be a world first in circular economy, where we're bringing the whole community together to say, including our Indigenous community, including businesses such as Bega Cheese, but including people that work in the fisheries, in the forestry, in all walks of life, bringing them together, getting the benefit of their knowledge, understanding exactly what they're doing, but also what their dreams are, and seeing if we can bring the principles of circularity together that touch everything from soil health to biodiversity to emissions to water to economy to health services, bringing all of those stakeholders together and creating a truly circular economy that sees an entire region united, if you like, with a common purpose and a common goal, but on really good principles that actually is very hard to criticize them in any way. And I think, and so we are going to attempt to baseline all the data in the Bega Valley, from economic to environmental to social, and then build off that baseline to show what you can actually do as a community if you work together. So it's really exciting. The close association with the University of Wollongong comes from our funding of an accelerator with the Bega Valley Shire Council. The exciting thing for me is that this year we've nuanced or changed that accelerator to be one of the first business accelerators with a focus on circularity. I think anywhere in Australia, it will make a huge difference. We're on a very exciting journey, if you like, in terms of what I think we'll be able to do in circularity. I think the exciting thing for me, and especially with the Association of UOW and a number of others, this has already been nominated to the UN Global Food Sustainability Summit as a global game changer. So again, we'll do it in the regions. We'll show that we can actually lead the way because of the unique nature of regions.
Thank you, Barry. And I'm sure there's lots of colleagues that are listening into this, thinking that as well as the fabulous work of the accelerator, that there are other links in terms of educational content and research and collaborations, read data, that we can keep the public.
So I'm very excited about it, Ned, from the point of view that I think so if I put my business hat on it, normally the way you start business with a new customer is that, or with a customer, is that you do one thing with them and ideally it turns into 10 things. And I think that's what's going to happen with what we're doing out of the accelerator. And already, I wasn't even aware of the sort of quality of robotics speciality that Wollongong University had. And as you can imagine, somebody with 20 manufacturing sites will use a lot of robotics. And I'm going, well, gee, there'll be a link, which isn't to do with circularity, but it actually shows how you do link. You can use one base to link to find other bases to work with.
Thank you, Barry. And if we had more time, then I would let you go on for longer.
No, I understand.
Fabulous panelists to talk to, and I'm sure we'll do lots of connections afterwards as well. So I'd also like to introduce the lovely Chris Lacey, who's CEO and Company Secretary of Multicultural Communities Council of the Illawarra. And Chris's exec roles include not-for-profit community housing, family services and disability in the Illawarra and Southwest Sydney. He's taken the MCCI team through a period of dramatic growth and change since mid-2016 and has a passion for social justice and supporting the not-for-profit sector. Chris is chair also of and non-executive director of Family Services Australia, a non-profit charity focusing on helping children, young people and families with services throughout the Illawarra, Shoalhaven and northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland. And he has a proud and long association with the university, including serving on our former community reference group. So Chris, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks Nancy. And can I too just take a moment to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Dharawal people and pay my respects to elders past and present and to any Aboriginal people who are on the call today. I'm in my role here at MCCI because 45 years ago, 8 people got together in a person's lounge room, 8 people from different migrant backgrounds and wanted a better deal. They were concerned about the equitable access to government services and the availability of interpreters and translators in accessing those government services. And when you lead an organisation that has a 45-year history behind it, it gives you some pause to reflect on the great privilege it is to be leading an organisation that has been working in the multiculturalism space for a very long time, and both overcoming a range of challenges as new communities come to Australia, but also trying to tackle recurring challenges as new migrants come and start to begin a new life here from whatever circumstances brings them to Australia. And that's one of the things that really energises me about this work is the constant change that's occurring. The very same issues that people migrating to Australia from, say, the Middle East or from Burma or from Africa in most recent years are very similar issues that migrants who came to Australia in the late 1950s and earlier after the Second World War were facing at that time. In many respects, our country has done well to overcome some of those challenges, but many of them still remain. And so we have this wonderful opportunity to draw on the lived experience and strength of existing migrant communities in the work that we do today. MCCI is a peak body, so we represent the interests of migrant communities. And in the Illawarra, we have such a successful multicultural story. I think I hear that a lot from politicians that Australia is one of the most successful multicultural nations on earth, and in many respects that's true. But it's also something that we must never take for granted. And so in recent times, the coronavirus pandemic has shown us that racism in Australia is really not far from the surface. And when people from particularly Asian Australian backgrounds were the subject of some fairly awful experiences at the start of this pandemic 18 months ago, it was a reminder to us, I think, that we should never take what we have for granted and that there is always work to do. I was asked, I think, tonight to talk about 3 things that I'd be keen to see from the university in our relationship with you. And the first of those for me is I'd really like to see a continued and highly visible presence of the university as a champion of multiculturalism. I think that as such a respected and diverse institution as the university is, universities can tend to look quite inward sometimes. And as somebody sitting outside of the university environment, I would love to see the university taking a much more visible and proactive role around championing these issues of diversity and inclusion. The second thing that is really important to me is more of a question around equity. So my mum was a teacher, and the value and importance of a good education just was always something that was quite natural in my family. But having worked for a number of years with some very socially disadvantaged communities in community housing, and now working with some communities who experience barriers to access through language, I think tackling this issue around equity of access is ever present for us. I'd love to see the university taking a strengthened role about turning that light bulb on for young people, and crucially in sort of that year 8, 9, 10 age bracket, to open pathways for young people who may experience barriers to a university education, but also to really turn the light bulb on that when, as a young person, if you have good mentors and set goals and think about what your future could be, that once that light bulb is turned on for young people, almost anything is possible. And so rather than thinking about how do we provide pathways for young people in those upper age brackets of schooling, in year 11 and 12 in particular, I'd really like to see the university do some more work at a younger age. And that involves working with communities and working with schools in particular. And the final thing is a little bit more selfish, I have to say. As a non-profit organisation, we're really always keen to innovate and look at new ways of working. We know and are very close to the communities that we work in, but for us to be able to invest in R&D is really quite challenging. And so whilst we have a range of partnerships with the university that often come up through a researcher by researcher basis, somebody will have a particular interest in something and make an approach to us. I'd like to elevate that conversation a bit more to a much more, I guess, planned and systemic approach, and look at what are the community and social issues that non-profit services are trying to tackle, and how and where can we plug in together to try and address those. Often it can be very hard for people outside of the university to know where to plug in. And so if there was sort of like a concierge service for the non-profit sector, to find a way to say, dear UOW, we're looking to tackle this problem. We need some help in this area, whether it's to do with a community issue or particularly something on our business, to help us operate more effectively and efficiently. How and where do we plug into the university to do that?
That's great, Chris. There's some really good suggestions there. And again, I'm sure that everybody out there is thinking, oh, actually, that's quite useful for me as well. And particularly the idea of more of a front door for our community and potential community and industry partners, so that we can, help solve problems together and provide opportunities for your organisations and our staff and students. So don't worry, we are allowed to go a little bit longer because we've had such great content come up from our panellists. So last but not least, I'd also like to introduce you to Tina McGee, who's a proud Wiradjuri Ngunnawal woman, born and raised on Dharawal country here in Wollongong, which is great. Tina's a mum, a grandma, a businesswoman, an educator. She's got so many qualifications, including a graduate certificate in Indigenous trauma for recovery from UOW. She's delivered training to Aboriginal organisations and individuals in Certificate for Business Governance and Community Services, and she specialises in working with children, young people and adults with out-of-home care and family support fields to support trauma recovery. She also leads the PSP Learning Hub funded by the Department of Communities and Justice, providing a range of educational resources, training and professional development to agencies and individuals delivering services under the PSP program. Tina is a former student, has been a staff member, is a community partner, and has some great different perspectives to share with us about her work and also how we can engage better together. So Tina, welcome. Thank you for your patience.
Nancy, thank you. And forgive me, I've got a little bit of sinus today, so I'm a little bit croaky, so I'm sorry. I apologise, and if I need a drink. I'd just like to say thank you for the introduction. And before I begin, I too would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're all meeting on today. And for me, on Dharawal country, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. And I do like to mention those of the stolen gen who never made it home, and our children, because that's where, for me, I believe our future lives and grows. So thanks again for having me. And I was quite excited when I was first approached about participating in the panel. As I said in my meeting with you, Nancy, that I have got a bit of a history with the university, and in a variety of ways. I have worked in EEO several years ago with Robin Weeks and her team there, and was part of the an initiative in the Elsa Dixon traineeship. Have worked across with the educational faculty and Woollyunga and the Mirrabah Homework Centre several years ago when I was at the Illawarra Aboriginal Corporation. But I also have a history, I suppose, with my auntie, other elders and grandmother that was involved with when the university first established their education unit, which, I'm very proud to be part of. And I know other employees that you have and students that were around, that their family members were around at that time. I now have a daughter who's a student there in a 4th year of a double degree. And I also own a business that I have done my training there, but also my daughter-in-law has a business who purchases services from the printing department at the University of Wollongong. So I suppose, these connections are very, very strong and varied. But just before I begin, I do want to give a little bit of a history, like from my perspective as an Aboriginal person in the community, but also some of the varieties of roles that I've played with the University of Wollongong. I just want people to reflect on, in a time in history that it was up until 1972 in the Principal's Handbook here in Australia that right up until then a principal could make a decision based on more than 1 or 2 people making a decision that they didn't want Aboriginal people in that school. So right up until 1972 we had many members of our families and our communities that were excluded from education right up until that time. So if we think about that in the timeline for the Aboriginal Education Unit, now known as Woollyunga for UOW, that was 1972. We then had the early 80s where the unit was first kind of established to support Aboriginal students. Mid-90s was when, the unit first really got a building, and we had some very instrumental people in this community driving that unit to be opened. We then had a name change in 2006 where the unit was changed from the Aboriginal Education Unit over to Woollyunga. And then, we now, and I just want to touch on that a little bit because I suppose it will lean to where I'm going with the vision that I'd like to see, is that when that name change took place, at the time I was an employee of the university, and I was also on the board of one of the larger Aboriginal organisation in the community. And at the time, whilst there was some consultation that took place around that name change, I know that I wasn't consulted in either of those roles. And then we go to 2019, 2020, and I was a student at Wollongong University at the time, and also again a board member on an Aboriginal organisation locally, and we had the introduction of the Bachelor of Western Civilization that again had some consultation around it. But I know for myself as both a student and a community member, was not involved in that. So I suppose for me and my involvement in the university and the greater community, both in staff and students, for me, and what I'd like to see when we talk about, you know, consultation, collaboration, and working with our local Aboriginal community and other community partners, that and other speakers today have spoke on that, around that, you know, reciprocity and, you know, a two-way communication, that it's not just this is what we'd like to do, that, you know, our voices, you know, we are part of that conversation, and that our voices are heard, and that they're documented, and that they're promoted, because when we go back to ask those questions about, well, you know, who was part of that, or how were we part of that, often that information is not available. I also would like to, and I think, Joe, thanks for the work and what I've heard today about what you were doing with the RAP program, because I think from my perspective and the part that I've played, I'd love to see, you know, that Aboriginal employment strategy, not just starting at where our students are leaving school. You know, the Mirrabah Homework Centre and the AIM program, I know for the kids that we worked with in out-of-home care, and even for my own children, you know, that was a big part of their connection to the University of Wollongong, and where they went on to, you know, engage in, you know, further studies and participate. So I'd like to see, you know, around that Aboriginal employment strategy, and like Chris also said, you know, reaching out to our kids at a much earlier age, and how do we, you know, how can we do, you know, engage in that. I think also, I would like to see a little bit, well, not a little bit, more around that cultural safety component, because if we're looking at, you know, having our students in, and I think from both groups we've heard from, you know, other Aboriginal panelists that talk about, you know, that support, and it shouldn't just be coming from the Aboriginal staff that are in Woolloongabba. You know, they too, like all of the other colleagues that you have on equal positions, have their own roles to fulfill, including a whole range of tasks. And I know for myself, when I've been involved, you know, employed in government or state government positions in an identified position, you're not just doing the same position as everybody else, you're also carrying those baskets of, you know, additional support for your non-Aboriginal colleagues, your Aboriginal colleagues, your Aboriginal, you know, students or participants that are participating. And you've also got that responsibility back to whatever's happening from the university's end back to community. So it's a big ask for our Aboriginal colleagues. Having said that, though, I think we need to also see them as leaders in that field and as an area of expertise. So most definitely they should be the people that we go to when we're looking at, you know, other people have spoke about, it's hard for community groups to know where to go to in the university. So most definitely, if, you know, other sections of the university and other faculties are reaching out to connect with community, I do think that there should be, you know, I know that through the programs that they've got there, that, you know, being able to touch base with them to say who and how should we do this, to make sure that, you know, that cultural safety and that cultural responsibility is, you know, given some consideration, and I suppose the level of respect that needs to happen in that two-way communication. So yeah, I think that's it for me. Thank you, Nancy, unless there's other questions as well.
That's fantastic, Tina. Thank you. I mean, we've had some real food for thought from all of our panelists about our operations within the university, and some things that we need to hear about how we can do a much better job in terms of training and awareness and ensuring cultural safety for our communities, for our Indigenous communities. Also, you know, how we can connect with our young migrant communities and our regional and rural communities down in the South Coast and Southern Highlands as well. So I think it's really good to have that broad conception of what our communities are, and that our responsibilities extend as well as outreach and getting students in and doing research to broader engagement and what we can do for the society and the communities in which we're embedded. Now, we've gone over time a little bit, but I am told we have 5 more minutes, so I'm going to ask, we've got one question, so that I shall ask that question and then I'll wrap up and say thank you. So from Danielle, we've got a good question that actually our panelists have started to talk about, which is about what can we do more with our industry and community organisations in terms of connections? What can we do better? For example, is it internships? Is it outreach? Is it the content that we teach? Is it working together more on joint initiatives? Does anybody want to take that one off the top? Barry, do you want to have a bash? And you're on mute.
Yeah. So look, I actually think that it's funny because I've listened to some of the sessions throughout the throughout the day where I could, and that sort of common theme of communication always comes up, you know, and I think sometimes and companies are as guilty of it as universities are, if you like, where we all get tied up in our day jobs. And you know, I know if I want to make a new relationship or sell a new product, I've got to knock on the door more than once. I've got to continue to go back, and I've got to continue to tell people I've got a really good idea for them, and I've got to realize that, you know, I've got to just keep repeating myself, because eventually they will. And it may be then, you know, months later, they might ring and say, you know, that idea that you had, I actually need it, or I actually now want to. And so you know, and I hate to sound very corporate, but if I think about all the companies that I've bought over the years of my life, it's sometimes been 2 or 3 years of just I don't want to tell you the stories of how I got Vegemite back, but let me tell you, it didn't just happen in a 6-week period. When people look at the corporate world, they hear about the M&A activity and the high intensity of the takeover or whatever else. But quite often that's a strategy from 4 or 5 years ago, where you've been building a relationship and talking to the people and making sure they know what you think and you know what they think. And I actually think that's, you know, and as I say, it's not a criticism of the university at all, because I would equally criticize our own company for that, in the same way that I don't think we've developed a sophisticated approach to how we communicate, you know, across organisations. And I don't know that corporate Australia values universities enough, except as a source of future employees. And I don't know that universities actually understand corporate Australia quite well enough. And I think that's the key to it. And you know, and what's been my experience in the last, you know, few months as we've been working on the circular economy and deciding to create the circular accelerator, it's that we're suddenly talking a whole lot more. And I think that, as I said earlier, I think that's the key. And I think from that, you'll then decide whether it's internships, whether it's shared projects, whether it's an external project that we both participate in. I think that all begins with communication.
Thanks, good point. And it reflects well Chris's idea about that sort of front door and the concierge service that we could provide to try and link in a bit easier. So just weaving in Joe Shikaro's question, and that'll have to be the last one, but I will take any other questions that come back after the session. Is there any one thing, Chris, that we could do right now that would make a big difference to your organisation, MCCI?
One thing.
No,
pretty hard,
all the three.
Pretty hard question to answer, but what I would invite all participants that are on the call today is who are part of the university ecosystem, and this comes quite naturally to most of you, I think, is this idea of curiosity. Be curious about what's happening in the wider social services sector in particular. And think about how the diversity of thought and world experience that exists in your wonderful institution can play a role in helping services like ours tackle shared problems. I think for me, that word is about curiosity, looking out rather than looking in.
Fabulous, thank you. Joe, any one priority that you would have for us, whether it's, you know, addressing our action plan, our reconciliation action plan, or working with your organisation, what one idea would you have for us?
Very difficult to narrow it down to one, but I'll give it a shot. I think that deep listening. You know, there's a methodology and an Indigenous way of being that's called Dadiri, and that is a deep listen, and really hear the voices of your Aboriginal staff, your community, your students, and take on board their suggestions and their guidance. This will elevate the profile of the university and you know, improve outcomes for everybody concerned. I think, yeah, that would be my advice.
That's fabulous. Thank you, Joe. And Tina, any last thought or suggestion from you before we close?
I think I would echo that. Didiri is what I was thinking in the deep listening, but we need to build those relationships. And like I said, I think expanding that out to the wider community, you know, for that two-way communication. And I think the benefits for both, so that it's not just industry, it's also, you know, those community and not-for-profit groups and sectors that have so much to offer. That to bring, you know, and enrich not only, you know, learners for students, but also for educators, and to be able to, you know, share that information back.
Fabulous, thank you. Well, thank you, panelists. It's been really inspiring, and I'm sure everybody else is feeling the same way. We've got some great suggestions there, some really interesting projects that I know a lot of us will want to get more involved in. And those last insights about, you know, I'll take those sort of two about Didiri and that deep listening, but also about curiosity and finding out, looking, especially in times of COVID, as we talked about this morning, looking beyond the insular sort of got to sort our own backyard out and think about how we can make a difference with our broader communities. So look, I'd like to thank you all, especially for staying a little bit longer as well, but I hope you'll agree it was a really interesting and useful and important conversation, and thank you for being so honest and so open. We've got a couple more questions that I'll go to afterwards and try and get back to our participants, but thank you ever so much for joining us, and I hope you'll, if we were all in the same room together, there'd be violent applause at this stage to thank you all for your contributions. So thanks, panelists.
Thanks.
Once again, I'd like to say thanks to Nancy and our panelists. That was a wonderful session, really illuminating for us all. I think it's generated a lot of chatter. Probably you as panelists haven't been able to see some of the... We've got an internal WebEx going at the moment for this event, and there's just been a huge number of points made about some of the discussion points that you've all been making, and I think it's really given people food for thought moving forward into our next day. So we're going to wrap up this session now. Thanks again to everyone. I wish we could have applause. Unfortunately, we can't. Before we go, I'm going to give everyone a bit of a briefing about the working group exercise, which is what we're going into next, and a little bit of a preview of what's to come tomorrow. So